We just celebrated our little guy's 8-month birthday or anniversary, whatever you call it, at 8 months.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. We live just north of Wrigleyville, right in the Buena Park area, uptown area.
Okay. Yeah, we were in Andersonville before we moved up here. Yeah, for about 12 years. And then we've been here now for 10 years. So
Wow.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we've been in the city for about 6 years now, or going on 7 years, which is crazy. The time seems to go by so fast.
Yes. I feel like we just moved up here and our guys were little, but now they're teenagers.
Wow.
They grow fast.
Yes, they do.
So the minute you turn around, they're adults already. Okay, let me try to get everybody else in. Sam, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you. Nice to meet you. Can you hear me?
I'm glad to meet you too, all the way from Senegal. Now
Yeah.
that's what I call a worldwide platform.
That's a long way away.
It certainly is. I'm glad that you were able to join us.
Thanks for the invite.
It was my pleasure. Once I read about your organization and you, I said, I got to reach out to them and see what we could do.
Appreciate it.
Tom, can you hear me?
I can hear you beautifully. Hi, Lois.
Hey,
Hi, Marissa. I see Modesta's on here. I've worked with her, but I only see her name.
Okay, I'm trying to I still can't figure out half the time.
Go to gallery view. You can see everybody. It's like
Yeah, I'm trying to admit everybody one at a time. Some people are still on mute, so.
Wow.
That's what I'm trying to do. The Human Freedom Festival on Saturday was amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, Alessandro is
great.
He's an amazing fellow. Fellow as in our international fellow. I mean, he's an amazing guy too, but he's an amazing international fellow.
Did you record it?
Oh yeah, it's all over the place. Alessandro's on top of that. It's on his Facebook page, our Facebook page, everywhere.
All right, terrific. Very good.
Everyone.
Annie, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, hi.
Oh.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, you know something, I'm always excited when they actually do this right. It's like a little child in a candy.
Yeah, a little thing popped up and asked me to unmute, so I was like, okay.
Yeah, I keep doing that. I keep saying, okay, unmute, and let's see where we go. It's nice to meet you, and I'm so glad that you were able to make it. All right, how many are your associates able to make it too? Or?
Yeah, we have myself. Hi, everyone. I'm Annie from Prison Arts Collective, and we have Alvaro. Do you want to wave? And JP. So Alvaro is a fellow working with design, and JP is a teaching artist. And we also have Natara, who's one of our teaching fellows as well.
Terrific. I'm going to give everybody a little time to get in, and I'm actually trying to figure this out as I go along. Marissa, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh.
Thank you. It's very clear. Thank you.
Oh, good. Like I said, I keep getting excited every time somebody can actually hear me. Very good. Okay. Let's see who we've got so far. I don't know, all of a sudden with Zoom now you have to admit people half the time. Karen, are you there?
Yeah, yes, I'm here. Oh, wait, let's see.
Hi, Arlene.
Hi. Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you, I just can't see you.
I know, I have COVID and
oh my God.
A little in my favorite outfit, let's say.
Okay, well, feel better.
Thank you.
We'll talk after. When did you get it?
Sunday.
Oh. That's not
Not,
good.
not fun. I got it from somebody who has it for the second time.
No. Oh.
Poor thing.
Yeah, it's bad enough you get it once.
Thank you, Marissa.
Just feel good. And congratulations, Karen.
Thank you.
Oh, I just realized we have another of our members too. We have a big representation here. We also have
Great.
Azadeh, who's one of our volunteers and a designer and artist in LA.
Terrific. Hey, Lee, can you hear me? Lee, can you hear me?
I can. I just had to unmute.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Terrific. I'm just trying to get, like I said, I'm just trying to get everybody in. I'm going to give her another couple of minutes and then we're just going to get started and people will come in as they can and leave when they have to. So, Sam, what time is it by you?
It's 10:07 p.m.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was awake. I was awake anyway, watching TV. So figured I'd join an interesting conversation.
Terrific.
Where are you?
I'm in Dakar, Senegal at the moment. Yeah, so on the same time zone as the UK, which is not that crazy, but a little late.
So I can actually say it's worldwide right now.
Yeah, there you go.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good to me. When do you come back to the States? Or you stay there?
I'm here at least until late summer 2021. I'm supposed to head to the DRC soon to work on one of the schools that we have out there. So COVID depending, that will be happening soon.
All right. Yeah, I can hear you on that one.
Yeah, it hasn't been easy for travel planning, really. As people on this call probably know.
Yeah, right. Okay, you know something, I'm gonna get started, and whoever comes in as we're going along, then that's great. So first, for those of you that do not know much about what we're doing here, the Arts House is all about the power and the impact of the arts and celebrating that. So this goes right along with it. And the conversation series, this is the second. We started in November with veterans in the arts, and this is the second one. This one will have probably a few other follow-up conversations, depending on, seeing how this one goes. But certain topics lend itself to a lot more conversation than others. The next one is going to be in March, and that's going to be the beginning of an arts and health series, and we're going to be starting with the arts and prevention. So the conversation series is all about dealing with various issues in the arts, sharing ideas and possibilities. My goal is literally to inspire each other, to collaborate with one another on future projects, hopefully, and for this to serve as a catalyst for other conversations and maybe programming, and we'll see, the idea is literally to see how we can all come together. The importance of networking, to me, is probably the most important part of what we want to do with the Arts House. Working individually, I know everybody is being challenged now, but I totally believe in the idea of collaboration, working together and networking and seeing how we can help one another. This is a real crazy time. It's a challenging time, with the incitement of hate and divisiveness and fear and inequities in health and education and wealth. And I couldn't be more appropriate to start talking about the human rights in the arts and how it intersects and literally where we can go from here. As far as my invited guests, you should be honored, hopefully, because I did invite you because of who you are, because of your background, because I love what you guys are doing. And if there's anything I can do to help further what you're doing, that's the whole idea of what this is beginning to start all about. So right now, I would like to start with some introductions on the individuals that are here. So Sam, since you're the furthest away, you can start right now and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Lois, and nice to meet all of you. So as Lois has already indicated, my name is Sam Powers. I am the co-founder of a U.S. 501c3 nonprofit called the Lens on Life Project that supports computer literacy and photography training for at-risk youth. We work with host organizations in 2 countries at the moment to basically install full-time photography and computer literacy program. So that's in the Zaatari refugee camp in Jordan and a town called Goma in North Kivu in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Just as a brief reason as to why we picked those places outside of the kind of founding story of where Lens on Life came from, the Zaatari refugee camp is the largest Syrian refugee camp in the world, with about 80,000 people, mostly from southern Syria, who escaped during the civil war. It is becoming a full-on city. And we have a teaching program there for basic advanced photography as well as computer literacy, taught by a Syrian photographer and himself a refugee. In the DRC, goes back from number 1 to number 3 on poorest countries in the world, and in the middle of multiple wars throughout the last 20 years. We have a school in a town called Goma, right at the base of a large active volcano near the Rwandan border. And in that part of the world, we're doing the same thing, teaching computer skills as well as photography. And we've employed a staff of Congolese folks to actually lead the courses. Plans to go into Iraq. We led a workshop in 2015. And, interestingly enough, the next plan is actually to bring it back to the US to open a project probably in 2022. Again, COVID depending, because it's been quite a nightmare in the Bronx in New York, where I'm actually from, and my brother is currently working. So in a nutshell, we started about 3 years ago, and the goal was really actually to provide initially photography training following the passing of my mother, who led an art gallery, and then it evolved into a job skills program, a computer literacy program, and at the end of all of it, what we've basically been able to accomplish is a course and module by which students who had never seen or used a camera or computer are leaving and actually getting jobs in places where the job market is either non-existent or very much informal. So that's, not much about me, but more about the organization. And I can't wait to hear from everyone else about what they do and why they're on this call.
I appreciate that, Sam.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted Sam to repeat the name of the organization. I didn't quite get it.
Yeah, the Lens, as in like camera lens, on Life Project.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're on Instagram and have a website, and or try to be active on social media. It's the name of the game these days.
Plus the fact that you can
in the chat box, of course.
Yeah, I'll put it right in the chat box. Good idea.
do that, and also on our YouTube channel, I uploaded his video to introduce his organization, so you can find it. You can find it on there.
Thank you.
Okay, Marissa, why don't you go? It's your turn.
No, sure. Thank you so much for bringing people together, and we need the collaboration right now more than ever. And thanks for all sharing your work. And I think just to say that I don't know all of you, but I suspect that each of you do something to make the world more equitable every day. So I want to say thank you. So my name is Marissa. New York is where my work is and my heart and my soul, and because of COVID, I'm here in Florida. So it's and I'm navigating these two spaces, and I never understood why two people could be, or a person could be at two places at one time, but it's definitely the case. So I run an organization called Art and Resistance Through Education, or ARTE, and we, at the end of the day, I paused for a second because there's so many different things I want to say, but at the end of the day, we work with young people to amplify their voices for human rights change, and specifically through the visual arts, right? So thinking about, prior to COVID, we worked obviously in physical spaces with folks, and whether it's a public school or whether it's working with students at Rikers, incarcerated students, and then also we're doing community workshops with people across New York City and also in different places, invited in different communities. So yeah, a lot of it, I always say that we do murals and it's a part of what we do, but it's not the end goal. It's actually, I think, the beginning of something. And for me, the end goal, or there is no end goal, right? Like the pursuit of justice and the pursuit of upholding one's human rights is a lifelong goal. So we work with young people to really understand and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and internalize it. And especially working with young people of color and young leaders of color. And since COVID, all of this is translated, I guess you could say, to the digital space. So in some ways it's been heartbreaking to not be in person with folks, but recently we launched a program called Youth Voices Lead, which I'm really excited about. So it's a digital training space for young people to use the art, especially the realm of social media. We're just starting on it. It hasn't been launched yet, but it's a pilot program. We've already received over, I think, 120 applicants for like 10, 12 positions. The last thing I'll say to all this is my favorite is when we were looking at how people, we asked people, how did you hear about us? And one person wrote, I overheard two mothers talking about it on the subway. And that just brought such joy to my life. I don't know how that happened, and B, it makes me really happy that young people know that this is something that they should be a part of. So
you should be happy. If they're talking about you, then you're doing something right.
Especially on the subway, you can't get more New York
right?
than that, right? But thank you, and good to see such familiar faces as well. And yeah, thank you. I'll put our information in the chat box as well.
Terrific. And at the next few days, I'm going to send everybody's contact information and information about their organization, so you can follow up that way as well. Okay, Annie, why don't you take it away?
Okay, sure. So I want to echo Marissa and just thanking you for putting this together, and it's really great to see everyone. I know you reached out, I think, through LinkedIn and I was like, usually you kind of just get those and you're like, I don't know, but I read and I said, wow, this sounds amazing, and I'd love to, meet and be part of it. So thank you for finding us. Yeah, and it's a topic that's close to my heart. So I'm the founder and director of Prison Arts Collective, and we're dedicated to expanding access to the transformative power of the arts to people who are incarcerated. And we started as a part of the university. I was at Cal State San Bernardino at the time, and it was together with students, and we went into the prisons and led classes starting in 2013. And that one sort of class became a model that has expanded to now I'm based at San Diego State University, where I'm the director of art and design. And so Prison Arts Collective has moved here, but we have multiple universities involved. And the whole idea is just engaging with the resources and expertise of the university community and the wider artistic community to support people who are incarcerated in learning about the arts, and also in growing their arts capacity. And it's a really a community-based program in that we try to find out what's needed, what do they want to learn, and then go find people who match with that, as opposed to saying we know what art is and we're bringing it in. So it's very much of a balance between what's needed and what we can offer. The only other thing I'll mention is we do have a couple of different programs, and one of them is an arts facilitator training, where we teach a 60-hour teacher training for people inside the prison with arts experience, and then they're empowered to be peer facilitators and lead classes and really cultivate creative arts community on their own with their peers. And it's such a beautiful program, because not only do they have that leadership, but also when they are able to get out, as some of them have, and some of them now work for us on the outside as teachers, they are able to transfer those skills into like employable things. And so I think that that's probably the program that I feel strongly about. And I'm so happy that we have so many members. So I don't know if they want to chime in and add anything about Present Arts Collective or just speak throughout the dialogue, but I'd welcome if any of them want to add anything.
Terrific. I appreciate that. Before I ask any questions or do anything, I want to make sure that everybody is introduced. Carolina, you want to start?
Yes. Thank you so much for the invitation. And it's so exciting to hear everybody talk about your organizations. I'm taking notes, just listening at everyone. So I'm an immigrant, an immigration lawyer, and an artist. And I founded Touching Land, which is an organization where we use experiential arts as a tool to empower immigrants by teaching them their rights. So we teach them what a warrant looks like, everything regarding their rights, emergency plan of action. We have that program, but one of the most important elements is we push spaces. So we bring them to beautiful studios around New York City. I'm based in Brooklyn in New York. So we bring them to studios where most likely they're not going to be, they won't have access to these spaces, but pushing the idea of, my immigrants, our immigrants belong there. So they take a 4-week course. We have that track, and then a second track, which is the In Conversation track, where through clay, through cooking, and through textiles, we bring different unlikely communities together to learn about their humanity. So, we've done it in Brooklyn, we're gonna do one in Oklahoma, but the idea is to use the kinesthetic power of clay and of cooking and of textiles to build between communities so that people can see each other's humanity through the arts while making something together. So we have a lot of exciting projects down the line. The idea is for the programs to live in other studios around the US so that immigrants can become more visible and there can be bridge building between communities that might not realize there's more that they have in common than what separates them. So something that I think we can all agree we need a lot of right now, with just compassion. So in a nutshell, that's what Touching Land does. And yeah, at your service for anybody that wants more information or anything.
Sounds good. Thank you, Carolina. Michael?
Thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me to be part of this discussion with all these fantastic artists. My name is Michael Cotey. I'm out of Chicago, Illinois, and the project that I co-founded and run is called #Enough Plays to End Gun Violence. The project was launched shortly after the subsequent El Paso and Dayton mass shootings in 2019. Seeds of it were planted earlier, though, with the Parkland shootings. And the thrust of the project is that we ask young people in middle and high school to write short 10-minute plays that confront the issue of gun violence. We keep the prompt and topic as open as that. And then from the submissions that we get, we select a collection of 7 or so plays. And then we make those plays available to communities across the country that want to perform them in a stage reading. So this has been our pilot year, actually. And on December 14th, which was the 8-year remembrance of Sandy Hook, we made the plays available, and in around 50 communities across the country, 3 international locations, we had readings of these 7 plays. And the goal is that these plays serve as a catalyst for communities to have discussions about gun violence in their community and how it impacts them. So using it as an opportunity to engage community leaders, stakeholders in their school system, in their local politics, to come and have a dialogue. And of course, because of COVID, all of that was moved digitally online. Hopefully, in subsequent years, we're going to do that more in person, so that ability to have communication and dialogue is face-to-face, and that you can share space with these stories with each other to discuss the topic. So we're in between rounds right now, looking to have another round where we're calling for submissions and then having a nationwide reading over the course of next year's school year. But we've just recently launched a call for monologues from teenagers called around the topic who we are and who we could be in response to the insurrection on the Capitol. So we've put this call out to teen writers to submit to us 1 to 5 minute monologues that they record themselves or someone else doing on social media as just a way to process what is happening, as a way to get leaders and adults to pay attention to what will be the future of America. And that's really what the focus of this project is to empower young people to find and practice and own their voice around these issues, and to get the adults, quote unquote, to pay attention to how they're affecting these young people.
Stacy, it's right up your alley.
So
Yes.
that's it. I'll put it in the chat, our website, and thank you again for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Melissa, why don't you take it away?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Melissa Raymond Molitor. I am also in the Chicago area, based in Evanston, although I teach at the Art Institute in the city. I am the founding co-director of Kids Create Change. And Kids Create Change is actually, it's been in the works, just, project oriented and outreach oriented for a few years now, but we just recently became a nonprofit. The goal, really, the mission of our organization is to utilize art to engage young people in self-advocacy and activism. So through participatory art projects, collaborative art making, public art, public exhibition, we sort of create these programs and create spaces where young people can use art to explore social issues that are important to them. Our programming is informed by anti-racist and healing justice practices. We work with artists and art therapists, mental health counselors, educators. And as I said, we just established ourselves as a nonprofit, and somehow it also all came together that we were able to secure a space. So we are opening Studio 3 in Evanston. It's a community art studio and gallery. And the goal for that is to really center the art and story and voices of Black, Brown, Indigenous, people of color, young people, artists who are doing activist work, and also be a hub for, just kids and families who need a different way to talk about social issues, and also adults, educators, bringing them into a space that's a creative space and uses creative methods to create dialogue around the inequity that we see in our community, and really try to push those conversations through art, bringing them into the public and engaging not only the community at large, but also our community leaders. So, yeah.
Thank you.
I can put the link also in the chat.
Again, I will send around everybody's contact information and the information about their organizations. So you don't have to worry about that as well. Tom, why don't you take it away?
Okay, thank you, Lois. My name is Tom Block. I'm the founding executive director of the International Human Rights Art Festival. We are kind of an organically growing collection of events, online literary magazine, international fellows, youth fellowships, at the intersection of art, society, and the spirit. And what we try to do is collect the energy that art activism and artists can bring, and then really interact with, like Melissa said, with decision makers within the community, but also nationally on our advisory council or honorary committee. We have Senator Schumer, Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, John Lewis worked with us. Some of them have made videos for us. We really feel that infiltration, using kind of the soft power of vulnerability and beauty in our artists, is the strongest way to affect change. You can do that, or you can rush the Capitol. And given those choices, I decided to go with the art myself.
Good move, Tom.
Well, I mean, I'm here. I'm not arrested yet, so well, that's good. And we have a very strong and growing international footprint, which is extremely exciting. I mean, we are a small downtown New York City arts organization, but in Nigeria or Italy or India, where we do a lot of work, all three of those places, we are considered a major and important international organization based in New York. And to that point, we have a direct action component working with artists in exile and on the run in Africa, and their connection with us has literally gotten them out of jail in Kenya, provided them specific and physical support, as we had one artist moving across Southern Africa as he was pursued and climbing a fence to get into South Africa. And we've learned the transparency that we provide through our social media and website postings is very important to them. So we really try to make the connection all the way from artists and activists on the ground right up to the most important political figures. And that's kind of, we're young, we're 2.5 years old, but that's the direction we're heading with our work. And we love partnerships. If anybody on here, I'll put the website in, thinks there's some kind of programming we can do. Partnerships are an amazing way to increase energy, increase audience, outreach, and we're always developing new programming at these various intersections. So great to be here. And I have worked with Marissa Gutierrez a couple times, which is exciting to see her there, but everybody else is new to me. Thank you.
It's the whole idea is to introduce everybody to everybody. Okay, I think we lost one. I can't find Nicole, so I am going to, the idea of this also is to just have a general conversation and start the conversation. And I'm going to start it with a question on, do you consider, or is art a human right? So, Annie, I know you do because it's on your website.
I mean, I will say, yeah, it's one of the core principles that this program is founded on. I definitely believe that it is. I mean, yes, like, is there anyone who doesn't think that? I'm sure not on this call. I'm sure that we're all in simpatico, but maybe there are people who don't. But I don't. I'm curious to ask Marissa, like, I know the that Universal Declaration of Human Rights that you're thinking of, and in a past life or children's books, and was referencing that for youth. But I don't think art is in that. It's not, right? So I just think, yes, it definitely is, but it's not officially. So yeah, if you want to say anything about that, I'd be curious.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think like it references cultural activities and participation in cultural activities, but it doesn't there's a lot of things that the declaration doesn't explicitly mention. And I'm glad you mentioned that too. Yeah, and just for folks, this is, I don't want to make an assumption that everyone knows, but like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and looking at, it was one thing that students have brought up to me recently too, is like the idea this was created in 1948, and it's by no means perfect, and it's not an exhaustive list. And like, even when you think about art from like intellectual property or like internet access or things like that, these are things that they could not have foreseen. So I think I love that document. That's something we teach, and it's the core of everything we do. But like, I think you're right. Like, these things aren't explicit. Like, I think we pull from freedom of expression and all these different things, but it's not perfect. And I think I love when students bring that up, because they're like, it's cool, but and what does that mean for our life too? I think those are some interesting conversations they bring up. So yeah.
It kind of skirts the issue in Article 27, which talks about arts and culture is important. You can probably interpret it in a lot of different ways. And I'm sure our politicians will interpret it in many different ways. if you go back to Article 25 to 26, when it talks about health and education, you could kind of fit the arts and how it deals with the transformation into that, and how the arts deal with leveling the ground, you know, as far as education is concerned. So you could probably make a good statement for that and say it's in there on a lot of different levels, but does not say specifically the arts are a human right. Goes around the circle. So we could probably use another Declaration of Human Rights. We could sit down and write it. In 2 years, in 2023, actually the Declaration turns 75. So at that point, leading up to that point, I think we can probably do maybe some work on how to refine it based on contemporary society, and work on that with the youth and adults, and see, you know, how we can kind of fit it into a more contemporary verbiage.
Lois?
Yeah.
And the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, communication and access to communication tools are a human right. So if one wants to consider the arts within that broad context of communication, perhaps that's where we can expand it and get it to the United Nations.
Arlene, you want to introduce yourself as long as you're...
Hi, everyone. I'm Arlene Krebs, and my whole career has been dedicated to the arts, education, and technology. I have created dozens and dozens of events, which I call social sculptures, which bring people together for transformative political, artistic, social action purposes. It could be everything from a conference to bringing people together to experience a performance. It could be everything from organizing a protest to creating a community mural. I take that concept from the German artist Joseph Beuys, who founded the Green Party in Germany. He was Europe's one of the most progressive artists, but older than most of the people here on this Zoom call. So you know him, but I do. Also, I've served on the board of the Monterey, California, Monterey County Arts Council, and was the president of that council for a number of years. And I'm a transposed New Yorker, having been raised and born in Brooklyn. So I see the Bronx and New York people. And I'm also Lois's longtime relative.
I knew you were going to fit that one in there.
I had to fit that one in. So that's why I'm kind of here also. But I do have to leave in a little bit. But I wanted to mention one project that we did here in Monterey County that has consistently gotten funded from private foundations as well as from the state council. And that was working with juvenile youth in juvenile justice facilities, using arts as a transformative device, transformative medium to help these youth express themselves and gain power and understanding of their deep humanity, of their human rights. And we did this through painting, mask making, sculpture, etc. And then I was president of the Arts Council at the time. I got the exhibit of the youth's art in our local museum. Unfortunately, the youth couldn't see it, but we took lots of pictures of it hung, and we had photographs of the youth creating their work, which is always very heartwarming and an incentive for funding. So we sent all that back to the youth, et cetera. And so we've also done the same with veterans and low-income farm workers, et cetera. So I just thought I'd mention those two because they kind of fit into the wonderful range of programs that I'm listening to today. And I congratulate all of you. And I'm so happy, Lois, to see this next generation of art enthusiasts, advocates, and activists.
Yes.
So
Pass
cheers
it off to
to
the
all.
next generation, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned the Juvenile Detention Center because we'll go back 20 years when I did and worked for the Alcoholism Prevention Councils. We did, I think it was about 3 or 4 years worth of programming in the juvenile detention facilities here in New Jersey. And I'll never forget when I first proposed it to the council. And they said, they looked at me and they said, and this is the council, why would you want to go in there? And I said, you know, why not? I mean, why shouldn't they? And when I walked in the first day to work with the kids, they said to me, we're not going to talk to you. We're sick and tired of talking to people. Everybody tells us what to do. And I looked at them and I said, well, you haven't dealt with me because I am not going to tell you what to do. And I want to hear what you have to say. And that changed the whole scenario from there on in. I'm sure those youth at this point are adults. Unfortunately, we couldn't follow up, but it was an uphill battle to convince the funders to give us the money to go into the detention center because they, you know, they considered them, you know, an entity that they didn't need to deal with because why should anybody want to go in there? And I'm not sure how far we've come at this point from there, but that's how it was then. And it, you know, the arts leveled the playing field educationally wise for a lot of youth. Anybody else that has, Stacy, you have anything to say about that? You work with youth on a daily basis.
Yeah, hi everybody. So I'm Stacy Block. We have another Block on the screen. No relation, I don't think. So Lois and I go way back, right? I remember when we had the Arts and Prevention Certificate Program through Rutgers, and
I'm trying to reestablish it too.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, Lois is a mover and a shaker, so so things happen when Lois is around. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker, but as a social worker, what I do is I developed a program many years ago that, and I'm still working doing that. It's called Reflections. It's a teen improvisational theater program that addresses teen issues, and it runs out of a county agency in Bergen County. For the agency is called the Division of Family Guidance. It's under the Department of Human Services, and there's just a slot for me. Like I don't have to worry about grants. You know, it's like unbelievable that the county has supported this program since 1989, and when I was 4, and I started the program. And so it's more, you know, basically more of a prevention type of program where the teens volunteer their time and they enact different scenarios on all different kinds of topics. We do scenes on mental health issues, on cyberbullying, on dating abuse. I mean, pretty much any topic you can think of. And then they stay in their role and their character, and then I facilitate a discussion with the audience while they're in roles. So the audience can ask them questions, they stay in character, and we have those issues then get addressed. We also do more workshops. So we do some more improvisational type workshops to help people with being mindful and listening, and improvisation is such a great way to help people do all of that. And then I also work with adults too, and do some assembly programs with my adult group, adult actors, and I think that's it. So I'm really big into, you know, the drama therapy, psychodrama, sociodrama, playback theater, and combining all of that, you know, with social work and arts and education.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for putting in that. I know you a long time. We go back a long way.
Yes.
Yes, we do.
So I'm glad we're connected again. Thank you.
Yes, so am I.
For involving me.
It's been a crazy long time, but
Yeah.
yes. But yeah, going back to the arts as a human right, which is pretty much what we're all talking about here. Is there any?
Could I
Go
jump
ahead,
in?
Michael.
Just been mulling this over. This is a bit of a tangent maybe, but I can't remember where I'd seen this, but maybe it was an op-ed on the outgoing administration. But it was, a reflection on the lack of art in this administration. The lack of revere around poets and musicians and storytellers, and I don't know. I find that not coincidental to where we are as a country right now. I find that when you deprive, a country of the pleasure or the understanding that the arts is important and impactful and meaningful, that I think the nation suffers. And I think, I don't know, this isn't really an answer to the question. I'm kind of riffing here, but I feel like, if you compare it to previous administrations, there's no value in our current nation's government for what the arts is or can do. And I think it reflects in the current attitude of its people. And I just don't see those things as being exclusive of one another.
No, I agree with you. In the last 4 years, in this administration, every year he's tried to eliminate the arts budget. Caroline?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add that if you look, dehumanizing has always been the object, right? And I go down to detention centers often and help families and organize lawyers to go down there, and touch is eliminated. Education is eliminated. Books are eliminated. Art is eliminated. Like, I had to smuggle stickers. So I think that, again, like you're saying, Michael, it's not a coincidence. I think that it's intentional. The way that we treat inmates, right? These families that are seeking refuge in the border are not criminals. And why are we treating criminals that way? Like, why is there that word? Why are they wearing uniforms? Why are we forcing them to work? Like, it's a continuous slavery. So I think that if we've learned anything in this pandemic, is that we need the arts, right? That we need mindfulness. Like, the arts have been keeping, like, what are people doing at home, right? If we look at, obviously, each status of different class and different people, essential workers, are all navigating different things. But I think that joy and arts and having that space where you can express yourself is like oxygen. It should be part of our rights, right? It is, we in Touching Land, we say, joy is a right. Loving whoever you want is a right. Like, that is part of what we teach in our curriculum, and it's owning and feeling ownership in, I have the right to be happy and to express myself, is so integral as a human being and to have a successful development.
You're so right on. It's just, we don't, and this goes back for a while, we don't value the voice that the arts gives us. We don't value the impact and the power that the arts actually make on the individual. The transformative power of the arts is amazing, and it touches on so many different areas. The idea that the arts can give an individual a voice is something in the last 4 years that they've tried to cut out as much as possible. And maybe we stand a chance in the next 4 years, but it's always been that way. It's always been, do we allow people to have a voice? Are the arts, do we need to put money into the arts? When you always talk about, when you hear, I look online all the time and I read all the articles that come out. They always talk about, especially in light of COVID and everything else, and small arts organizations are suffering tremendously. big organizations like the museums, the institutions, Broadway is suffering terribly. But when they talk about giving funding to the arts that are suffering, they are only talking about the large institutions, basically, the museums, Broadway. They're not talking about the arts organizations like yours that are out there in the community doing the work with the individuals, because that they don't value as much as Broadway or the museums, because they have a voice and we don't. It's always been, you know, as far as I can remember, the arts kind of look like the Museum of Modern Art and Lincoln Center, and when they talk about the arts, that's what they're talking about. What I want to do this way is give all of you guys, the smaller organizations that are doing the important work out there in the communities, a voice. And the way we can do that is by all coming together, collaborating and networking, and speaking as one voice, because there's more collective power together than there is individually. And we need to get that out there, that the arts can transform communities, they transform lives individually. Without it, I did a campaign a while ago, and I have a t-shirt, I don't know, Stacy, if you remember it, a black t-shirt that says, "Can you imagine a world without the arts?" And I still have
We're breaking down the walls too.
Yeah, I have those t-shirts and I wear them in the summer all the time, and I'm constantly getting stopped by people responding to the question. And sometimes I have to take a step back, because I'll be in an elevator and somebody will say to me, "No." And I don't realize the fact that they're actually responding to the question on the t-shirt. Caroline, you mentioned, you know, that the arts should be as you know, it's like oxygen. Somebody had said to me, that just reminded me, somebody had said to me, and that is why I actually did it in kind of black and white, that the world without the arts would be like a world without oxygen. You couldn't breathe, you couldn't feel things, you couldn't do anything. And that's what we need to bring out now, utilizing all of our voices together. You know, it affects, when we talk about human rights, we're talking about now the incitement of all the fear and the hate and the divisiveness that is going on. And that kind of leads me to the other question I have, and that's kind of what's the role of the arts in promoting a culture of human rights?
So can I just respond to the first one before we pass it?
Sorry,
Just
Jenny, after you, I'd like
okay.
to.
Okay. So yeah, I want to respond to something that Michael said, and I completely agree, and I think you're hitting on an important point that I'm not sure if I'll articulate exactly right. I know you were saying you're trying to formulate it, and I think the same way, is that the arts are a mechanism for freedom and for voice. And so for free, so in a way, whether it's like an actual human right or not, I mean, I was curious, and I think it's such an interesting discussion, but aside from that, it most definitely is in the fact that it allows for, it's like a vehicle for our humanity, right? Like it's a way to express that piece of us that doesn't have boundaries or rules, or like you said, Lois, where you ask the kids, no, I'm not going to tell you what to do. That's what the arts are, is a place for freedom. And when we go into the correctional institutions, to the prisons here in California, the thing that struck me the most from the beginning, so now I've worked, you know, with hundreds of people throughout the prisons all throughout the state, and the thing that strikes me the most is when people say, oh, when you come, you bring the humanity, or oh, I feel human. And when I first heard that, I was so struck by that, and like kind of stopped me in my tracks, because to think that they don't feel that, right? Because, you know, not to place any blame anywhere, but just living in an institutional environment, it takes away that kind of thing. And it isn't just the prison, right? It's also the systems in our society, or the structures, like to your point, that take that out. So way before I started this, I worked in public education, and I was just shocked at the difference between the schools. There, you know, we always hear about it, but it's really true that there is just a complete lack of the arts and such rote learning in one path versus like this more rich collaborative experience in, you know, wealthier neighborhoods. And that it starts right there, you know, so that builds that idea that, oh, the arts aren't for me. And so it's really complex, but I think ultimately it is that freedom. And I'm really sorry that I have to go at 3, but I'm just going to say it real quick now, but I want to hear the next thing as well. But because it's so amazing meeting all of you, I'm just like taking all these notes and going, these are such cool programs. And thank you so much, Lois. I'm so happy to connect with you.
This is the first, hopefully, of many. Did somebody else have?
Yeah, I actually, real quick, if you don't mind, before we move on to the next question, I've been sort of sitting here mulling on this idea of art as a human right, and then also listening to sort of the responses to that, and what struck me was that a lot of us really went directly to, well, art, you know, could fall into this category, and art could fall into this category, and art could fall into this category. I think that's part of the problem. I think art absolutely is a human right. And I think that from art as a human right, then you can talk about how it you know, is a vehicle for communication, and it's a, you know, a way that we can preserve and share culture. I think that art needs to be able to stand on its own because of how vital it is. You know, and I'm really struck. I love this, you know, just coming together and hearing about the work that everyone's doing, because what we're really doing, I think, is decolonizing art in a way that makes it more accessible and makes it just part of who we are and how we sort of move from day to day, as opposed to, you know, Lois, like you were saying, it's, you know, it's not the Met, it's not in these museums and in these galleries, it's in these communities and it's in these people. So sorry, just wanted to throw that out there before moving on.
No, I agree with you. It's, you know, the arts have a lot of different spokes, I guess you can call it, and it touches upon so many different, it intersects with so many other different areas and issues. But it's, when you just get down to the very basics, art is communication, it's storytelling, it's expression, it's learning about yourself, it's learning about your culture. You know, it's just, it goes into so many different areas, and this is just my own pet peeve, but I always had this issue with, you know, we always promoted in school and in the media, you know, sports is everything. Sports is all over the place, and it has its place. But the arts have never been promoted and talked about or marketed the way sports are in schools and in the communities. You know, parents will die to raise money for their kids' soccer team, but try to get them to raise money for the community theater. And they'll look at you and say, yeah, maybe. You know, it's just, that's just a bone of contention that I've had forever. And if I have anything to say about it in the future, that would change. But it just, we have never taken the arts seriously as far as what it can do for individuals. You know, as far as I'm concerned, art is a human right. We should all have the right to express ourselves, to to advocate through the arts, to do storytelling through the arts, through theater, through dance. I mean, there are so many different, the protests, all of the protest songs that have been around for ages. I put on the YouTube channel, Billie Holiday's Strange Fruits from the 1939. She was one of the first African-American singers to come out there and sing about racism. And artists have always been there to say what they feel and put their lives on the line, which kind of leads me to, you know, my next question. And how or will the arts contribute to a just and equal society going forward? What can we do?
Lois, can I say something? This is Lee.
Sure.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I think this is kind of following up on the last question and leading into this question. I think that one of the problems that we see in our system in a kind of diverse way is that the arts are considered so separate from other disciplines, that all disciplines are seen as silos. And these silos are so kept at such, you know, such narrow lanes that we don't see the power of integration and of integrated, not just our knowledge, but of community in that sense, of bringing people together, that there's a power certainly of linear development of art or of, you know, whatever, medicine or whatever, but there's a power that comes when we can come together and bring our individual streams of knowledge and talent together and integrate them in a way and put our knowledge together in a way that really allows us to, you know, become holistic and intersectional and, you know, see things from a more systemic point of view. And I think that that's what's needed in order to really speak to the community, in order to, for, you know, power to the power that you're talking about that's often lacking in the arts. It's pulled apart from things, but it really is so crucial to, as you said, so many things. It's not separate. It's not a thing over here. It's not like there's art over here. Art is a part of everything. And yeah, that's what kind of what my thought was.
Yeah. Tom, I want some, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to add, and again, more as an echo to your last question, but also as an introduction to this question as well. I'm an artist. I volunteer with Prison Arts Collective. My name is Asade. I'm based in LA. And my, what I try to tell people is that art is an expression of humanity and of our collective human experience. And to me, art itself, I see as kind of my religion. It's the one thing that I believe in, which is this common human experience that we all have, that's shared, that doesn't introduce differences. And I think it's really interesting to talk about human rights and the right of every human, you know, does every human have the right to art? Because we have to first value human life before we can fight for the right for people to have arts. And I think what we're all talking about and what all of these amazing individuals that have started these organizations are trying to do is value the other and value the experience that those who in the past have thought art was not worthy of. So in other words, in the past, we've seen art be very classist and be very exclusionist because people, only certain people had access to it, but also only certain people were considered worthy of having the ability to exercise art. And it wasn't, you know, you can't speak to art as a human right if you're not allowing and seeing people and acknowledging their human experience. And so I think obviously the two go hand in hand. And I think as what's so exciting is to be able to see that there are so many organizations that are trying to reach individuals that are having experiences that a lot of people think are unique, but in fact they're not. And I think what's really interesting about, you know, the experience that I've had with prisoners, or that I've had with the homeless community, or that I've had with disabled children, what it's taught me is that their experience is like my experience. And I think once people recognize that, and once the individuals in these groups that have been kind of excluded from the conversation of art realize that they have the right and that their stories matter, then they're going to be that much more empowered to participate in the conversation and demand that they have a place at the table to say, guess what, we are part of this larger story of expression, because that's really what art is in all of its different forms.
Yeah, and it's different for everybody. And I'm glad you mentioned that you work with, you know, the disabled community and have gone out there. I started my career at United Cerebral Palsy in Manhattan, working with severely multiply handicapped youth that came out of an institution for the first time in their lives. These were kids. And I said to them, I'm going to start an arts program for them. And these were nonverbal, had no physical capabilities whatsoever. And they looked at me, and you know, the administrators looked at me like and said, what the hell are you going to do with them? You know, you're just gonna play with them, or, you know. We developed the first, at that point, they were the communication boards, and we had them writing poetry. We had created adaptive equipment so that they could paint and they could tell their stories and give them a voice for the first time in their lives. And it was, nobody looked, like you said, nobody looked at them like an individual. They just looked at them like they were a disabled entity in a wheelchair that could not do anything and had no voice. And when we introduced the arts to them, these kids opened up. I mean, they had so much inside that they needed to tell. Nobody wanted to listen to them. You're right, that is the first time. You need to listen. If you don't listen to somebody else, then you're not going to hear their story or what's inside of them. They're not going to trust you. You don't build trust up with individuals that you're working with, they're not going to be open and honest, and that's going to come through in their artwork as well. You know, it's the same thing when I created an oral histories program in a housing complex in Jersey City. You know, everybody, you know, we had youth and we had adults sitting down at the table, talking about their histories and working on arts projects together. And it was, the youth never looked at the older adults as individuals, and the senior citizens never looked at the youth as individuals either. They didn't see that different, you know, they just, the media and everything, their perceptions were so totally skewed, until we were able to sit down at the table and say, we're here and we're going to listen, and we want to talk to you. That's when the art and the creativity at that point is allowed to come out. That is a human right. You need to be able to express yourself. You need to be able to communicate. The arts educationally will level the playing field. Community-wise can level the playing field. But if you don't sit down at the table together, you know, if you put up that wall, then nothing gets accomplished. You're right, you need to recognize people as a human being and to say that what they think is valid. So there, that's my 2 cents on that one. Tom, I wanted to ask you, I wanted you as the only one actually that from a festival point of view, from an advocacy and an activism point of view, how is that working into bringing an awareness to everybody else out there as far as human rights are concerned?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, there's kind of two issues. One you guys have all touched on, which is the human right of an individual to experience art and experience catharsis. But from a social point of view and political point of view, it's pretty well documented that the more repressive a society is, the less is creative thought and creative expression tolerated. And like I said, I'm working with two men in Africa for whom poetry can get them killed. In a sense, that's a testament to the openness of our society, that indifference, for better or for worse, that political and social indifference to the art. Because if you go and if you look into history too, in Soviet Union or the Eastern Bloc, you find that the more repressive a society, the more clear it is that art's a human right. So it's like a black hole. You see its importance due to what's going on around it. And we might not have a sense of that here in the society because we still are, although our leaders don't respect it, we are free to pretty much say whatever we want. The First Amendment protects us as well as a lot of heinous hate speech. But it is an interesting thing that in Cuba, there was something very recently where an art collective was stormed and the artists were taken to jail. In Uganda, that's going on. In Zimbabwe, it most definitely is a human right. And you can see it when that repression of a repressive government comes down upon it. So, I mean, my organization is trying to raise awareness of that issue through our work, as well as protect individual artists who are on the front lines. And you see it now in Nigeria too, with the NSARS protests and the art going on down there. So I think there's two very different lanes here. One is the right of an individual to experience personal catharsis through creation. And I don't think anybody would deny that fact here. I mean, it may not be supported by the government, but it is supported by private foundations, and no one would ever stop someone from creating art. And in other parts of the world, art and spirituality is still deeply intertwined with society in a way it's not here, whether it's Javanese shadow puppetry or Yoruba theater, or, you know, carving of Buddhas and Zen, you know, brush paintings in Japan. So, I mean, there's two ways to look at it. There's domestically, and then there's kind of what's going on in a more global sense. And I think all these issues are being approached in very different ways. That was a long way of saying whatever I said.
Gotcha. Well, that's it. You know, it's when we talk about human rights in the arts, we're talking about advocacy and arts activism. We're talking about the arts and how they deal with individual human rights. Carolina, I'm curious at how the immigrants that you work with, how free and open do they feel, you know, do they feel open enough to communicate what's going on and what they think through, you know, through the work that you do with them?
Well, so it's interesting to see the transformation, right? When they come into the studio, because it's very different when we go into a nonprofit and we do the workshop than bringing them into like a very upscale clay studio in the city. You know, it's interesting because we really see the transformation of even the way that they carry themselves walking into the studio the first time that they're introduced into the studio versus 3 weeks later, where they're moving around in the space freely and securely. They share a lot. You know, the reason we're very careful with who we put in a room when we're doing the In Conversation series classes, where we bring, say, more privileged communities or unlikely communities to the table. We never put immigrants that haven't gone through our empowerment program because the interaction is very different. They don't feel like they're in the same plane, a field where they could be honest and where they feel confident that they can speak. So we make sure that first they feel that power, they feel comfortable in the space, physical space. in order to feel like they have the right to speak and that their stories are important. And what's been really beautiful is once we place empowered or women that have gone through, or men that have gone through the program, into a space where they can have conversations with a different community that they normally don't speak with, it's been really lovely to see immigrants really dominating the conversation, and really telling their stories, where the impact that those interactions have had are, you know, women going into their privileged communities and making sure that they're paying, that their friends are paying domestic workers for holidays, for sick paid leaves, that they're not getting paid just $10, but they're getting paid $15, because, you know, we make sure that they understand the value of their work, how to negotiate a MetroCard. You know, little simple things, just like being able to feel like joy is a right. Nobody tells you that. Nobody tells you. So I think it's beautiful. It's a work that really, art is imperative to transmit this information, because while you're working on something kinesthetically, everybody's not looking at you like that, you know, but you're working on something and you're a passive listener. So people really open up in a beautiful way. So, so I think it's a matter of making sure that you're honoring different communities and decolonizing spaces. And it takes a lot of work and a lot of compassion. You're going to make, you know, we've made a lot of mistakes, but we've learned from those mistakes. But I think it's very important to start by reiterating those rights and reiterating that you do belong in that space. And not to the side in a crummy little, you know, downstairs, but you belong in these beautiful spaces where everybody else is at. So it's a way where we bring equity into these spaces. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I answered the question, but essentially, yeah, they feel empowered once we've reminded them, because, you know, I don't love the word empowered, even though it conveys the concept effectively, but it's reminding them of their power and their place in this community, that just because laws don't reflect the reality of your importance economically and culturally doesn't mean that you can't push those boundaries and that you can't push your ability to be in those spaces. Yeah.
Yep. Interesting. But again, you know, I still go back to the fact that if you don't build up that trust, it's still all about trust and listening and breaking down those walls. You know, the arts can transcend all of those built structures. But if you don't sit there and be honest with the person that's in front of you, then they're not going to be honest with you. That was the first thing I found when I worked with the youth in the detention centers. If I wasn't honest with them, they would say, screw you, you know, we're not going to do anything, because if you can't be honest with me, and if we can't break down the wall, then what do I need to deal with anything that you say or do? And that's, you know, that's what I've always loved about the arts. That's the name of the conference that we did for 10 years, Breaking Down the Walls. The arts can transcend, can go through all of that, but it can't go through that if you're not an honest individual. If you're putting up your own walls and barriers and you're working with somebody in a group or a workshop, then you're not going to accomplish anything. Right, Stacy?
It's true. Yeah. I mean, just being open, you know, and open and trusting the process and letting things unravel and just being present and really listening, like you said, really, and about respect, right? Just, you know, showing others respect for their space, for where they're at. You know, like we've seen miracles happen, you know, sometimes just through the art, whatever it is, we get more out of people. I mean, I've seen it than some of their counselors get out of them. I mean, you know, going to a group like I I've managed many different kinds of groups. I'm thinking one in specific, a group of adolescent boys with substance abuse issues, right? And going in there and doing some work with them, and their counselors being so surprised that, like, he never talks, you know, he never talks, but he talked when we were there, because we just, you know, just to be able to reach people at a whole different level it's just wonderful to see that happen.
Oh, that's it. You know, it's, you know, all of the theater programs that we used to do with the kids, you know, or with adults, you know, theater of the oppressed, you know, just getting people community-wise to talk about what they're going through and what issues, you know, that they're dealing with. You know, it's like, you know, all the films and the art that the artists are trying to do all around the world in expressing the repression and the government that's telling them that they shouldn't exist. And they literally, artists have been fighting and giving up their lives basically to get their art out there. So there has to be something that's more important to individuals than just sitting back and you know, and not doing anything. Art becomes their voice. We've allowed in certain areas, we've given them that voice. Tom, through your festival, you've given many artists a voice that many people would not know or have heard of. You know, it's that advocacy, it's that activism that art allows us that other areas do not allow us to do. We can, you know, in theater and dance, you can step a little behind and have the art in front of you and not feel like you're telling everybody your entire life story, but communicating what is important. You know, it's just such a communications channel that needs to, as far as I'm concerned, needs to be funded more and more, but that's a whole other issue as far as funding is concerned. But how do you think that the arts can contribute going forward? How can the arts contribute to the future of America going forth from here? Future of the world. How do we connect the arts as they are a bridge to the world and different cultures? Where do we go from here together? Okay, don't everybody answer all at once.
If I may try to answer that.
Thank you.
Try. You know, and it's been good to hear all these thoughts and conversation. I think, if I may, I was thinking a lot recently. Someone reminded me of like Frederick Douglass and abolition, especially thinking about abolition and the quote, and I have it here, is this like, it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. And you know, what does it mean to repair broken people? And everything that's been happening, like there's so much brokenness, like I think, and don't get me wrong, I don't think that like, I like, it's not like, oh, the arts, like we will have this and this will make all of us whole again, but I think that's one step, right? Like I think that's one way of thinking about like we work with young people because we're trying to, again, there's so many things that are placed on them, and there's so many things, especially working with young people of color who have been constantly told that they are less than what they are worth, and like and that they have to prove themselves and all these different things. So I think a lot of our work is like, you know, what does that mean to heal and to use that? So I think that's one piece of the idea of like what the future lies in terms of helping people heal, helping people, that art is that special place, right? I think there's a lot of work we have to do dismantling white supremacy, like all these other large things that we need to do. But I think art is the first steps to like building compassion and thinking about the healing that people need to do. So I don't know. So I really love that quote. And I know for us, it was also, it's a strange quote for us too, because while we work with all young people and welcome all young people, the reality is we work with predominantly Black and Latino Indigenous, and youth of color. So I think, and there's a reason for that, right? There's a reason because the access to the arts have been traditionally limited in spaces. So I think that quote is more of a reminder of why we do the work we do, and also remembering that there is a lot of brokenness that people need to work on themselves and their own communities. And again, like I said, dismantling whiteness and all those things that are breaking our society and have broken our society.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, working with youth is a very specific area. You know, it's kind of like you're kind of probably treading on thin ice, because you need to break through their barriers and their own walls that they put up in front of you, and you know, I've worked with many groups, and I have found them the hardest to get through to, if you know, but they have the most to say. You know, they if you let them, and that's the whole thing. It's not just, okay, it's allowing youth to speak, it's allowing immigrants to speak, it's allowing everybody to have a voice. You know, it's creativity's kind of, in my mind, creativity is the energy, the arts are the voice. You know, it comes through the arts, but it's that creativity that sparks everything. And educationally, we've always kind of put a damper on, you know, thinking individually and thinking outside of the box. And in school, you have to, you know, you have to pass your math test, you have to pass your science test, you have to do all of those things that are expected of you. But if you have a voice that is different from the norm, you are looked at a little differently. At least it was when I was working with kids and growing up myself. You know, it was like, I always thought totally different than anybody else in my high school. And everybody kind of looked at me like it was really strange, you know. And it was like when my son was in 3rd grade and his art teacher told him he had to draw a tree. And I always taught my kids, you draw and you communicate the way you feel. I wanted to fail him. You know, it was like, things don't have to line up according to a set structure. And that's where the arts come in. But we have to allow that freedom. There we go back to human rights. We have to allow that freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of communication, freedom to say, this is what I think, and I'm not a bad individual for thinking that. There's nothing wrong with me for thinking outside of the box and for saying how I feel. You know, but that's kind of the way, in my estimation, a lot of things in the school systems and even in the communities have been for a long time. You know, we need to come out and say, it's okay to speak the truth. It's okay to express yourself. It's okay to say how you feel. You know, and use the arts to create community, to build bridges across and around the world. And those are the things that, you know, I think we can continue to work on together, to talk about, to kind of maybe take to the next level and say, you know, like I said, we need to kind of create a new declaration of human rights based on reality today. And I think based on the fact that in 2023, it becomes 75 years old, I think it's due for an update. You know, it's like, okay, we don't always stick to the same old curriculum. We need to change things and speak up.
That's
kind of what yeah.
I would like to just add this because I have to leave. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I did a lot of work in prisons all during the 1970s and would love to follow up with some of you doing that work. But when we're talking about the arts now, particularly Lois and the ideas you just expressed, let us not forget it's not just a human right to be able to create art. It is also a human right to be able to access art, meaning to be able to go to museums, to be able to go to theaters, to be able to go to concerts and performance events. I'm a major grant writer. It's one of my skill sets, and I work for some arts organizations. I have put into every single grant application and have gotten them funded to include ticket prices to concerts and events, including transportation for low-income people who often don't have the modes of transportation, of working with other nonprofit organizations that work with at-risk youth, farm workers, low-income individuals, seniors, veterans, people with disabilities. I wrote a grant and I got 20 people, blind and low vision people, into a chamber music concert they've never been. So I really want to emphasize that in this whole discussion, that access, the freedom to go and experience art is also an essential human right. And quite frankly, right now, that's what I'm suffering the most. When people ask me, what's your desire for 2021? And not only to see my family and friends and see everyone healthy, my first response was, I miss going to museums and galleries, performances, concerts. My spirit is suffering. And I say that to all of you wholeheartedly. I am suffering spiritually from not being able to access the arts except virtually, which is of course compensating, but not the same. All right, I have to, unfortunately, I have to go. I have an appointment in 10 minutes I have to drive to. But
I'll talk to you later.
Bye. Goodbye,
Bye.
this beautiful group. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So if I might, I actually have to leave too, but wanted to just quickly respond, Lois, to what you were saying. I think that I actually have so many things that I want to respond to, but I think that, and I don't remember who it was that just spoke to access. I think that, yeah, I think you know, what she said is really important. It's not just about the right to, you know, make art and utilize art as a form of expression. It's also access to art, access to arts engagement, access to art participation. And, you know, when just thinking about what you said, you know, where do we go from here? Or what, you know, it's such a big question. But I think that on this sort of, I don't want to say micro level, but on this sort of more individual, more intimate level, I think it is extremely important to work towards ensuring that everyone has that opportunity to have access to art as a form of expression, art as a form of relationship building, art as a form of communication, art as a form of, you know, building community. But I think there's also this other piece where artists are really in a very unique position to be sort of molding and creating these spaces where we can be addressing human rights, we can be addressing the social inequities that that exist in our communities. So I think that there's so many different layers and so many different ways that the arts plays into this idea of human rights. And I think that, I think that the time when people tried to separate personal and political. Just, I mean, that's past. The personal is political and vice versa. And I think that that puts artists and people who are working with others through art in this unique position to harness the power that art has in order to address a lot of the inequities that are happening. So that's sort of my thought as to, like, you know, how are we moving forward with this, and what can we do with this, and you know, that might change next week, but that's sort of what I'm thinking right now.
5 minutes.
But I do have to run because I have a grant workshop I have to get onto.
Well,
So I just wanted to thank you, Lois, for inviting me. It was wonderful.
My pleasure.
Sort of meeting all of you and hearing about what the wonderful work you're doing. I'm really excited to be able to reach out and hopefully connect beyond tonight. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. It totally is. Yeah, what I will do from here at this point, I want to literally create a human rights arts project as a networking group, and continue the conversation, continue the collaborate, you know, see how we can collaborate going forward, continue the discussion. I mean, because this goes off into so many different tangents, and it is so important that we keep it going. I have always, and you know this, Stacy, I love the idea of pulling events together. I did a national conference for 10 years, and this is kind of an extension of that, you know. That's how I look at it. Everybody needs to come together.
Like the offspring.
Yeah, it's kind of the godchild of it. It's always about everyone out there that's doing the work in the communities that needs to come together and talk about what they're doing, and inspire one another and collaborate on some projects, and literally see where we can go from here. That was my whole concept behind the museum idea, the Arts House, to talk about literally the impact and the power of the arts, how it is impacting the community, how it's impacting individuals, and celebrate that, because as far as I'm concerned, that part of the arts are never celebrated. And if I have anything to say about that, I will do that, and I am trying. So, you know, I will be in touch with everybody within the next week or so to explain, you know, to do the networking. I probably will do it on LinkedIn and create a group network so that we can continue the discussions. And then we can take it from there and see, you know, see where we can go. So I